Hi, everybody. Welcome to one of our chairman chats, kind of what's on your mind sort of thing. And today I'm going to be having a quick chat with a couple of friends of mine from Recursive, who you may have seen on the IEV20 conference in July. Firstly, I've got David Yates. Dave, hi. How you doing?
Hi there. Hi, Chris. How's it going?
And George over there. Are you in a desert or by a beach?
We call it Shallow Beach.
Is that the kind of given for Recursive? I noticed you're not branded or anything, so feel free to send us some branding and we'll put it in subliminally, cut it into the features. So maybe just for those of the people who didn't actually see us have a chat on back in July on the IEV20, Intelligent AV20, which was AVCF's kind of little flagship moment out in the year. We had to do something. And here we are again, like so many people have become familiar with, men in boxes.
Pretty much.
We will have women in boxes as well and all sorts of things. Maybe I'll do a saw 1.5 magic trick or something, or maybe they'll do that to me, although I'll have to have a pretty big blade. Dave, why don't you just give us a little context about where you fit in with Recursive, just for the people who haven't seen you before.
Yeah, so I set up Recursive back in 2012. So effectively, I'm the managing director. And we're a fairly small bunch. There's 5 of us here full time. And we kind of work across a whole different range of interesting projects. We're very much project based. So we tend to get involved in projects ranging from AV through to acoustics or lighting or content or software-driven stuff. Generally, we work on projects which are very public-facing, but not always. But there's generally a very much an angle of how spaces get used. We're particularly interested in how people make use of spaces and how people will get benefit from being in a space and what that space can kind of give back to them. That generally takes some kind of angle of technology, but it, in a broad sense, could be anything from lighting through to soundscapes. We're not just focused on a particular branch of technology. We kind of look at the whole holistic approach. And we kind of set Recursive up back in 2012, so we've been doing this 8 years now. Because we were sort of led by the idea of how spaces can connect with people and how they can influence the way you kind of feel about being in a particular environment. And if we can use that tool set of technology, and by that I mean kind of audio, video based technology to kind of enhance that space, then I think that's kind of a magical thing. My background's really in theatre and acoustics, so both of those things have that kind of angle of looking at changing an environment in a particular way. For acoustics, through how it might sound, how it might come across to you. But obviously theatre is all about the kind of illusion you might create and the kind of sense of being in the moment. So those are the sorts of things that drive us.
Yeah, so you're very much, you've got a wide remit basically, and you're focusing naturally on people. People, not boxes, is what we always say, because
that's it.
It's very important to have the right people. So, George, where do you fit into the pattern? What's your particular role within this sort of, I wouldn't call it a hive mind, because that sort of means that you don't have any personal in, but what do you bring to the table in this sense? Are you support, or are you?
I joined Recursive fairly recently, at the beginning of the spring. And I'm in charge of the visuals, so very much of the content side. Content production manager is my title.
Okay. And Dave, what would you say? What would people have heard of some of the places you've actually worked on or taken part in working, supplying solutions to? If you could give me maybe 1 or 2 examples that people.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think most of our work is public facing. So I'd imagine that a lot of people would have either been in the space or have experienced a brand that we've worked for. So some of the early work we set out that kind of put us on our journey was working with people like the Royal Society of Arts, Institute of Engineering Technology, Institute of Physics, so kind of venue-based, but also kind of public-facing spaces that are there to either connect an organisation with its audience or be used as a higher venue as well. So some of those spaces I'm sure people would have been into and visited. Other things we've done over the last few years are areas in retail. So we've worked with brands like Puma, Adidas, brands like Burberry, Bose, and we've kind of looked at ways in which retail can have more of a connection with people to make the retail spaces more experiential and have something that's unique about going to that space to make kind of think again about how retail can kind of have a better place in connection with people, especially with a digital online angle of retail now. It's more important that we look at how spaces can actually have a better meaning for people when they visit high street, essentially.
Yeah, and just recently, when you came on to IAV, you were working in partnership on a particular side of a project with D&B Audio-Technica.
That's right. That's right.
Is that complete now? Is it still ongoing? Is that
so? That is complete. Yeah, that was a very interesting project. So that was a project for Burberry in China, over in Shenzhen, and Burberry are very forward-thinking in their kind of use of technology and how that fits into their retail journey, and they were exploring how to make use of social media as part of that retail journey, but in a really useful way. And in China, everything of course driven by WeChat. Yes. So we're looking at how WeChat could start that journey, the retail journey for them as a brand, and end you up sort of connecting into a physical space through that WeChat journey. So kind of going from the very digital to the very physical. And we were working with them on that journey, but specifically the end part where the physical comes into play. And we had a special area built in store where you kind of get invited to kind of visit, and you have a kind of unique experience there. It's very theatrical. It's very sort of tangible, and kind of like very theatrical in terms of surprising and something you're not going to see every day. And it was great fun, and they were very open-minded. And we were just looking at ways to bring lighting and sound and movement and content into a completely rich environment that would kind of immerse you for kind of 3 to 4 minutes. Just have this completely unique experience, but something that starts with WeChat and ends up with this kind of journey. And at the end of that, there's a whole photography piece we did, and those pictures get fed back into that WeChat mini program to finish that cycle.
I think we've got some demonstrations still. We can still get to the recordings from IV20. That will be up on our website if you are curious to see that. So that was very much, it sounds to me like the kind of project that was very much user-led. The person coming in would be, each person would have their own sort of particular journey within the framework. So you have to plan almost like a gaming kind of them going in and going through, transitioning from one thing to another. So very interactive.
Very interactive, yeah. I think a lot of what we try to do is look at making things more personal. So be it a corporate environment, be it a venue, be it a retail environment, how do we make those experiences personal to someone and actually memorable, that they end up with a connection and a feeling about space they probably didn't have before.
Yeah, and George, that's a more recent project. You were quite heavily involved with that particular one?
Yes, I was. When I joined Recursive, that was one of the first projects that I started to work on. It was really exciting. We used Unreal Engine, which was a huge challenge because we set up NDisplay.
Yes.
And the NDisplay environment. It was really exciting, but there was a really steep learning curve, but there was a huge payoff at the end. It's really, really amazing. Just I remember the first moment when we finished the setup and we actually could see the environment that's right behind me.
Right.
In that in that professional environment. It was amazing to walk into that room.
I remember, one of the things I wanted to do when we were still visiting and doing places was to get into the Institute of Physics because it's very close.
Yes.
Central London, it's close to me, and I've walked past it and I've seen it. It looks very interesting. Was that, how would you say, was that a challenging thing for you, obviously? And which is the place, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard this urban myth, don't know if it was from you, so was there a point actually where you got the concrete from bits being poured into it? And I've never heard of an AV, anybody involved in that. That's usually, talk about executive power.
It was a fascinating project, Chris, because I think in all our own journeys in our career, we've never ever been able to convince an architect to do anything. No. So it was an amazing thing. I don't think it's ever going to happen again, where we actually had an amazing connection with the architect, and the architect was incredibly involved in listening to how the space needs to come together. Because as we all know, in what we do, we're always the thing that goes in at the end. And the architecture needs to do its thing. It needs to talk its language, and it needs to deliver on that user experience, but also for the stakeholders who need the spaces for their various tasks. And then we kind of come in at the end, don't we? And we put in that stuff that's the operational side of stuff that fits over. Yeah. But this project was fascinating because they obviously dug down into the ground. They held the original facade because it's listed just down behind King's Cross, and then they built basically a kind of concrete construction, very bare concrete. Everything is bare concrete. Very kind of modern architecture. They then built this down into the basement and up above. And so what that meant for us was, we didn't know at the time, but when we were thinking about spaces and thinking about how we might deal with all the different cabling, the fiber, the Cat6, low voltage power, that all needed to go through the concrete. But when you make a polished concrete construction, you need to have all the pathways in that concrete before it's poured, or as it's poured effectively. So they need to be planned before it's poured. So you have to sleeve everything in, which meant that we were given a set of drawings where we had to mark out exactly where every single pathway would go. And there was no chance of changing that. So we were then suddenly, before the building was built, being tasked with defining how the end result would be from an operation perspective by getting every single penetration and hole in exactly the right place. And because there's very little internal fit out, if you got that wrong, it means that you would then see those cables coming through a rather ugly hole in the concrete. So we suddenly realized that we were suddenly now having to plan everything so many months in advance to get the end result spot on.
Very stressful, must have been. Very
stressful. And we sort of asked the question, well, why can't we just core drill the concrete later if we make a mistake? We won't make a mistake, but if we do, what do we do? And they said, well, you can't, because what we didn't know, of course, is if you've got a polished concrete finish, you can't core drill that because you have to use water to cool down the core that drills the hole, and that water will stain the concrete surface. So we couldn't. So we had to get everything kind of from concept, almost design to detailed design through the whole infrastructure.
You weren't thinking out of the box, you were thinking out of the concrete in this case.
Exactly.
You shall not go any further. That's and I suppose now, seeing as it's topical, what we're going through at the moment, it must be a nightmare preparing certain things due to work and people and how you go about it. But do you find there are projects that you've got some more time to prepare for? Or are there people coming to you very last minute for solutions? It's something that needs to be done. How's the sort of the climate at the moment for you as a sort of small business running this?
Yeah, the climate's tough. The climate's very tough. So what we tend to do is we tend to have a very long lead in to most of our projects, or not so much lead in, but they are they're often a minimum of 18 months. Sometimes we've done 4-year projects. So we're working on a project for a very long time, and we're going through the various REBA stages and delivering against those. So we've been very lucky in that we've had projects which have, to this date, have continued through the COVID lockdown period and into where we are now, that have sustained us. But being brutally honest, we're not seeing new projects coming into the market at this point. People are holding off, or the projects we had that were due to start as our other projects are coming to an end are not starting. So back in April, projects we thought would start around June got pushed back to September. And when we arrived at September, we were then told they're not probably going to happen now till beginning of next year. So we keep seeing these projects being pushed back because no one really knows what's going to happen, do they? So if they're corporate projects, if they're office fit outs, people are rethinking the point of that office fit out and the purpose of that office and the cost of that real estate and that lease. So those projects are kind of being pushed back. And if they're retail focused, well, retail can't get people into the shops as they once did. So that flagship store, which is all about, in our work, connecting people with that environment, well, if they can't go into that environment, then we can't connect them with it. And then why spend that money doing it?
Yeah, it's very much an example of like the uncertainty is just giving everybody, nobody knows.
It's super tough.
I was on an AVCF panel a while back, and I was saying, well, nobody really will know until there's one or two things. Either things do get to a balance, hopefully we won't be lingered too much in that, or a vaccine will come, and then it'll all, because everybody's an individual. That's the thing. Everybody's got someone to look after, people at home. So it's a great challenge, but AV, audio visual, and yourselves probably are people. Everybody that I know that's really good is a problem solver. So that must be especially important in your sort of world. I mean, I call you a consultancy because that's how I saw when I first met you. But obviously there's a lot more going on within that. And I mean, I usually sort of say, at some point I'll say, what's on your mind? What's the latest thing that sort of, and it seems to me as though you've got more than enough on your plate. That sounds like a bit of a snarky question. Oh yeah, what's on your mind at the moment? What are you doing?
Well, I think outside of what we see in terms of a market which affects all of us, I think internally we're going through some interesting times because unusually we brought George into our team. He's our latest addition to the Recursive team. Back in April, I think it was, just before lockdown happened. And it's been quite good to be able to employ someone and build our team throughout that period. So from a good news side of things, we've expanded our capability because we're forever being challenged with looking at what's happening next and what's coming as we all are and what we do.
Yes.
And one of the things we're really focusing on a lot is the role of content.
Yeah.
And the role that content has to play in the market. Because with the likes of Unreal Engine, Unity, and all these other fantastic tools we're seeing, we're starting to see an evolution of how our industry's moving forwards, and content is absolutely at the front end of that.
Yeah.
And if you think about us as consumers or in our professional lives, how much we engage in content and the production values are increasing all the time.
Without
But,
the content,
you know,
you don't really have, you've got clever things, but no, the storytelling and the content and everything, the people that, the thing that drives people, I agree with you, that's got to be, that's the key of it. If you've got a good story to tell, good content,
yeah.
you've got a chance. Sounds as though you're on top of that, you know.
So that, you know, that's interesting, and it's if anything, this period where we're not as busy as we would like, we are sort of taking the time to focus internally about how we adapt and evolve ourselves. And actually, it's quite nice to have the time to experiment a little bit and have more time to take lessons learned from a project like Burberry Shenzhen, which took up 6-7 months of our time, nearly, you know, for me every day, to actually look at the lessons learned and actually take some value from that and make us evolve internally, but also make it more valuable for future clients that we've consolidated those lessons learned and can take them forwards and say, you know, do you know what, we wouldn't do it that way next time, or actually we've uncovered these interesting things that could be done through using N-Display, and we'd like to take that further and see how we can, you know. So there's lots of good stuff that's come from. You know, time is valuable, isn't it? So it's nice to have that time.
You've got to look at the positive things, you know, because it's very easy to just get driven down by a lot of things. I mean, it happens. The mental health side of things is the other thing you've got to factor on. But it's been really fascinating, and we should chat again at some point in the future, because I want to sort of talk about our Stanley Kubrick passion and the little thing that you did on, I think it was on Twitter feed that I put on one of the newsletters, just a little, that much comment, but I could see definitely where that was coming from.
Well, I do think there's a lot that can be learned from that whole Kubrick. Although we shouldn't delve too much into it now, but we did talk the other day a little bit about John Alcott and his lighting approaches. And if you look at the Kubrick films and the different influences that lighting had on that, I think the environments that get created, and again, that kind of illusion that's created throughout all his films with the attention to detail, I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned in approaches to projects in that sense, about how important lighting is, for example, but also making sure that we look at the details, because actually sometimes it's the details that really make something.
It's the devil is in the detail. That's
exactly.
Well, Dave, George, thanks very much for having this.
Thanks for having us.
But I think it's been great, and it's nice to see you, even if it is a little box. But one day we will link up. One day, that day will come. So thank you very much, and thank you for Recursive. Well, you are Recursive, Mr. Recursive. I'm going to compose a theme tune just for you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chris.